Jessica, HISCHE, everyone.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
And it's been interesting because I think the last time you spoke, Jessica, was as a mystery speaker.
Yes.
In New York, 10 years ago, like 9 or 10 years ago. And it kind of feels like a bit of a full circle. So I'm very, very happy to have Jessica with us. Please, one more time, Jessica, everyone.
Very happy to be here today. Everybody's been so amazing, and I am honestly endlessly blown away by this venue. I feel like all conferences should happen on the set of as yet still in production off-Broadway shows. That's great. Anyway, so I'm really excited to be the closer of the day. I feel like I do things that are quite different than the rest of the crowd. So many of you that I talked to last night on other moments were like, why are you here at this web conference as a non-web person? There was a moment in my life where I was very, very entrenched in web things. I still do all of my own development for my sites and side projects, so nothing crazy, just like some very not up-to-date CSS and HTML and PHP and some jQuery and stuff. But I made this website with my now husband called Don't Fear the Internet, which teaches basic HTML and CSS to non-web people, trying to take the intimidation factor down. Many moons ago, I also made a website called Mom, This Is How Twitter Works. And this was not a misogynistic moms don't know things. I was legitimately trying to pull my mom off Facebook and onto Twitter. And so it's just very narratively written, and you can kind of learn the hows and twos of being on Twitter. I'm now not much on Twitter. I am a power user on Threads. I'm doing all of the work of trying to make Threads feel like old Twitter by just behaving in an extremely opposite of how everyone else behaves on Threads manner. So please join me on there and pretend like it's not full of a bunch of marketing people. I also, when my husband and I got engaged and married, we made, instead of doing a physical invitation to our wedding, we made a digital invitation, and it was a Parallax website that's still up now. The Parallax doesn't work on mobile, but if you check it on your computer, it's jessandruss.us. And my role was sort of design director on this, and all of my friends who are illustrators all created the artwork for us for free. And Jonathan Heffler lent me fonts for free, and then Russ did the programmatic stuff for this one with me tinkering in the CSS stuff. So anyway, that's why I'm web adjacent in some ways. And also one of the reasons why I feel like my work really resonates with people in the sort of startup and web world is everyone that does their thing and has a specific thing thinks that the thing that they do is the most important thing as a part of the process. And what I do a lot now is branding work. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today in a minute. But to show you a little bit more context for the rest of my work, I mostly am a commercial lettering artist, so I work for all sorts of clients. I do a lot of book covers and just general commercial commissions. Book covers are a very big part of my career, so I have done a bunch of series of classic covers. These were for Barnes & Noble, so you can still go to Barnes & Noble and buy a lot of these titles. And then I did a big series with Penguin that was also a classic book series called Penguin Drop Caps, which was modeled after a project that I did called Daily Drop Cap, which was another internet project where I gave people a little code snippet to use letters that I drew in their personal blogs to beautify the internet. And so Penguin commissioned me to create the first letter of the author's last name for 26 books, and each one is very narrative and tells the story of what's within the book, of course. And I do some work for film and television. I did the titles for Moonrise Kingdom, and also more recently, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. And this stuff is really super fun, because then for Moonrise Kingdom, I rented 40 seats at a movie theater and went with all of my friends, and we all saw it together, and it was the best. So. And then almost lastly, I write and illustrate children's books. So these are the books that I have that are out and about in the world already. And I started doing that after I became a parent. I am a pretty risk-averse person, and I don't like making things about things I don't understand, but I do like immediately making something if I have just discovered something, which is how all of my internet projects happened in the past. I would learn something and be like, oh my God, how come everyone doesn't know about X? And then I would retell that thing in a language that I felt was more accessible to people. So my first 2 books are really like a repackaging of my 4 years of therapy for my daughter and my now 2 sons. And my latest book, which comes out on October 22nd, so please pre-order, that'd be great, is called My First Book of Fancy Letters, and I just love getting kids really excited about lettering, mostly because I think, I have talked at a lot of schools as a part of being an author, and when you go to a school, you ask kids, like, who here is an artist? And literally every hand shoots up in the air, and you just know that at some point, almost all of their hands drop. And very few people consider themselves an artist later in life. And I think that lettering is a really cool medium because there's no right way to draw a letter. It just has to look like a letter. You just have to be able to read it. And so if you tell a kid to draw a tree and they don't draw a tree that looks realistic, they might consider themselves bad at drawing. But if you draw a letter in any style under the sun and can recognize it as a letter, it's a good letter. So I think in that way, it's a very accessible medium. And then lastly, before we get into the meat of this, I have 2 brick and mortar shops. One is underneath my studio called JH&F, Jessica Hische and Friends. And the design systems tie-in for this is that Gina Bolton, design systems maven, works at my store. Because all of my store employees are just people that want to get out of the house sometimes, while also being able to do the work that they do. So she now works full-time at Microsoft and just sits at a desk and does her Microsoft work while the 5 people come to the store that day. It's great. And then I can go and say, hi, I'm like, Gina, what's up? Want me to get you coffee? It's great. It's nice to be with friends. It's also a very good fit check place, and so I just do fit checks there all the time. I do need a bigger mirror for that, though, so we'll see how that goes. But anyway, the topic of my talk today is called Found in the Details, rather than Lost in the Details, and this covers a lot of the logo type work that I do, which is actually kind of a majority of the client work that's coming my way these days. So what I mostly specialize in is doing logo refreshes rather than rebrands. So branding is like a massive undertaking, as I'm sure many of you are aware, people that have been a part of that process. But a refresh is something that a smaller team or an individual can be a part of, or something that can come in and adapt to an existing team. So I did a logo refresh for MailChimp back in the day when they originally had their script logo, which most of the time when folks come to me for a refresh, it's because some engineer on the team just typeset the logo in whatever was free and available, and everybody was like, works for now. And then if the company becomes successful, they're like, I guess we're stuck with that free thing for a while because we don't want to look like we're pivoting or whatever. And so they came to me to be like, hey, everybody really likes this logo, but can we just grow it up a little bit? And then years later, Collins actually did a huge rebrand for them, and it looks much different, and I really love it. And their goal was really to unite all the assets that they had, including this, the chimp icon. So I've been able to work on a lot of different kinds of brands as a part of this, and some people, it's a very, very close-in refresh where the differences are quite subtle, and some of them are a little bit more broad. Usually what we're trying to do is correct things that are design problems that the team of designers or engineers run into when they're using it. Stuff like scalability or usability, things that misread. There's also just like certain ones, like I did the Phil's logo, the Phil's Coffee logo, and you look at that and you're like, there's things to fix in that logo. But I'm not there to say a word. You know, like every now and then on Instagram, people will tag me to be like, I wonder what Jessica thinks of this. And I just do the zipper face emoji because I think it's like not the best practice to shit on other people's work publicly. So I'm just like happy to discuss in a investigative client meeting. But I really, really love this work. I think when you get far into your career, like I've been doing this for 15 years now, it's really easy to forget how deep your database of knowledge goes. You know, just because and I found that out too when we were doing Don't Fear the Internet actually, because, like I was relatively fresh on learning web dev stuff, and my partner had been in it for several years. And he was like talking about all these advanced things that we should teach and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, what would be awesome? Let's teach them how to not make the links underlined and blue. And like, I think having that understanding of like being able to get back into the beginner's mindset and acknowledge like all the things that led up to where you are is really important. And I feel like with this kind of work, I get to do it like every day, because I'll be just casually talking about typography with one of my clients, and they're like, what? Like I'm walking them through all this stuff, and I'm like, oh, like this thing. And they are like, I don't know that thing. This is crazy. How do you know all these little subtle stuff? And it's really nice to be able to sort of revisit that on a daily basis. One of the more exciting projects I got to work on actually was rebranding Squire guitars, which is part of Fender. So I actually redrew the Fender logo too, a little sneakily, and I was like, they did not commission me to do that. And Squire and Fender is really interesting because if you're familiar with the brand at all, they have a lot of different versions of their logo, and each of those versions demarcates like a different era in time, and they need those things because they bring authenticity and value to the different items. So they can't actually switch away a lot of the stuff that they have, even if they wanted to do like a brand consolidation. And that's so unique, because usually when someone has a ton of assets, it's because like over time things got kind of like misused and put in different file folders and things like that. With Squire, our main goal was just to like excavate the existing asset, which I think just sort of got live traced and manipulated over time, and try to get back to what the original designer intended. And I think that's what I try to bring to a lot of the work that I do. I did a home renovation like a couple years ago as well, and that was also my goal. It wasn't necessarily like putting my footprint on everything. It's about sort of an anthropological journey going into what was the original architect's intention and what would they want it to look like now. I saw Scott Thomas, who's a branding guy. He did the original Obama campaign logo a while back, gave this talk, and he had this periodic table of branding that I found to be super useful. I really like, I loved the previous talk too, like talking about all the different teams and ways that people happen. And anytime someone shows like the back end of their Asana, it's like pornographic for me. I'm like big on Asana. My Asana is like both like super organized and crazy chaotic at times, so it's like, which is very similar to my mind. Like I love everything nice and clean and pristine, but it's also like half the time like Charlie Day in front of the psycho map. And so like understanding systems is very nice. And so when I talk about the work that I do, I have to really explain to clients that my specialty is this little upper corner, and there are people who try to do end-to-end of this kind of work and do it just fine for a variety of sized companies, but I really think that collaboration always makes work better, and people that are specialists in the things that they do bring so much to the project and such like a unique voice and also a different perspective. So I don't try to like take over parts of the projects that I think are better done by folks that specialize in those areas. So when does a refresh make sense? So there's basic reasons, like you're trying to correct legibility or accessibility and drafting issues. Showing a maturation of the company is another time where you might want to do a refresh, something that you're kind of like moving it into a more sophisticated era. Another time there's like a greater rebrand happening and you want to blend the existing assets with a new direction, or other designs that are happening. You might notice that things are becoming harder to gel together, and kind of pushing the logo and the logo assets towards a more neutral position can help with that. So like I said with Squire, it was about excavating that to get it to a better place. With Fender, they had this logo called the Fender Spaghetti logo, and they were like, okay, well, we think this is going to be like the unified Fender logo, and we need the Squire logo to play well with it. So when we did an exploration, for one thing, this is my little update if you want to see that again. So here's where it is. Here's what I would do with it if they ever use my file. So hopefully someone discovers that one day and accidentally uses it, and then all of a sudden there's a new Fender logo. That'd be chill. So for the evolution of this, they were looking for a lot of different ways to look at Squire, it was, okay, do we put it in the same universe as the Fender Spaghetti logo, or do we reference this other existing logo, and sort of showing all these different options that we can do it. Originally, they were going to pair it all the time with the Fender Spaghetti logo, so it was about like, let's make them work together, and which was also my argument for why we should actually do a refresh of Fender at the same time. Because if you put a really new, clean asset next to an old, slightly weird asset, it just pulls out the qualities in both. One time I've like been doing talks for a lot of my career, and almost all of them have gone just fine to good. And the one time that I truly, truly bombed on stage, it's because me and a friend were giving a talk together, and I'm like usually like real like quick talky, bubbly, and she has this really dry sense of humor. And the two of us next to each other, I looked like an idiot, and she looked like like Debbie Downer. And sometimes like understanding how things work together, and that if they don't gel, it can make both of those things look bad. And so that's something too that when I talk to logo clients, I'm like, okay, let's look at the scope of what everything else is out there, and I want to make sure that this doesn't stick out in a way that's going to make the rest of the things feel less sophisticated or considered. Then we ended up in this space for the next round, and then finally, the final logo ended up here. So it looks a lot like the original, and the goal, one of my goals with logo work is always to give people an asset that's just a lot easier to use. And so even just adjusting it so it wasn't on this slight angle just makes it a little bit easier to typeset in almost any circumstance. So for a rebrand, those usually happen at bigger inflection points for the company. There's like a big pivot or a significant change in the offerings. There's trying to like aggressively target a new audience, never like leaving the old audience behind. It's like sometimes you show up to a meeting and you say a thing that you know they need to hear, and they're like, "You're a genius," and it's like, of course. So anytime that you talk to a client, you're like, "What we need to do is attract new customers without telling our old customers to fuck off," and they're like. They're like, slow clap, you know? And then another reason for a rebrand is they just never had a really well-articulated voice and vision in the first place. So this one was an interesting one because a company had bought a bunch of music properties, and one of them was Guitar.com and one of them was Guitar Magazine. And they were trying to merge these two things into one property. And so a lot of the art direction that I get from clients is like, make it feel less masculine, or that it's just specifically for old white dudes. Or also like make it feel less early 90s or whatever, or like make it feel on purpose super early 90s, but like through the lens of Gen Z. And so that was kind of the vibe of this one, where it was like the original logo actually has a very 90s vibe, but the new one has like a, what would a 22-year-old think the 90s was like? And so I try to not give people choice paralysis when I'm giving them things, and really like walk them through all the options. But I do feel, I am a person that believes that if someone asks for a thing, they probably need to see it, even if you don't agree with whatever that thing is. Not saying that happened here, but if some CEO steps into the conversation and is just like, but what if it was purple? Like, you can't spend the whole rest of the conversation like fighting about why purple is wrong. You just gotta go, that's a really interesting thought. Let's try that out. And then you just like under-design everything with purple in it so it looks like garbage. And then you're like, see, I mean, if you like it. And they're like, no. And so you kind of shame them out of their thing. But they do really need to see like a lot of different choices, and so I do try to give people a lot of options when I'm showing stuff, and variations within different versions. So at the beginning of a project, we always talk about brand equity, which is sort of like, what do you have that we should keep? And the things that I think about are sort of with the logo type, the overall style, overall weight, with the mark or icon that goes with it. What is the content of it? What's the illustration style? Like, containing shapes can make a big difference. And honestly, like the weight and density of both things are so important. This is one of those things where if you have terrible vision, it's actually an amazing asset while designing logo work, because all you have to do is just go like this, and you're like, does it look like it's the same when I can't read it at all? And then so, boom. So a lot of times I advise clients, like, blur your eyes and look at it, tell me what you see, tell me if you can read it, and like tell me what the weight of it is, and do you feel like it matches the rest of the stuff that we're doing. And then lastly, color. Color is a really big one. So that blurring eyes thing, to give you an example of an identity that's really identifiable, even if you super blur it. So New York Magazine has a couple of like these really unique aspects to it. I'm a big New York Magazine person. It's got these unique N and Y forms. It's got these long swashes. And then just the weight of it in general is not like a typical masthead weight. And so when you blur it, even really significantly, you can still really read it and tell the vibe of it, and you can kind of push things really far and see how recognizable they are. You know, with logos and brands, the ideal is people just need to glance at them for just a half of a second and need to be able to fully recognize what they are, and that builds over time. But if there's anything like that in an existing logo, you gotta hold on to it if the company is successful. If the company is flailing in the wind and looking to do something really different, then by all means, just like abandon whatever you need to abandon. But usually when people are going for a refresh rather than a rebrand, it's because they're like, we just got more money and want to grow, not like we've been flailing around and not doing very well. So color is one of the biggest things. Let's play a guessing game for how good you are at color. So this came up a bunch over the course of this talk. Who can guess this one? Figma, yes. All right. How about this one? Yeah, I know you guys are like, I'm too familiar. Get it away. This one started as this and is now this. Heck yeah. And that's like so funny because I feel like they don't own that new blue at all. You know, that new blue is really hard to own. If they just stuck with that boring navy, everyone would be like, oh yeah, Facebook, the end. How about just the color red? It's usually a split audience between Coca-Cola and Target. And so Target obviously has been doing a lot more brand work recently to get you all to say Target, because forever it was Coca-Cola. And Coca-Cola owned red and Christmas somehow for like all of history. And their logo type is so recognizable that when you see it in like other words and other languages, you still totally know what it is and says. And that's like the mark of some true brand equity there. I did some work for an energy company in New Zealand called Contact, and one of their big things was like, don't make it look like the Coca-Cola logo because it started with a C, but also in the same breath, we want something timeless like the Coca-Cola logo. That's literally everyone. And what is so funny to me is I do not find the Coca-Cola logo to be very timeless at all, so I have to sort of explain like what makes a logo timeless. Sorry, my partner is calling me. So what makes a logo timeless? The real key is it remains in continual use for a very long time. That is what makes something timeless, like by definition, because eventually it just becomes so recognizable and just part of like the daily fabric of life that it is now timeless. And so how do you do that? You be a successful company. That is a way to create a timeless logo, have a successful company, have a logo designed by a famous person. That's another one. I don't count myself on that list. I'm talking like Paul Rand or like Milton Glaser or something like that. The kind where like all the designers will come out and write like really angry think pieces if anything like moves or changes about the logo. Your logo is remaining in place if your logo was designed by someone who recently died and is a legend in the design community. Avoid gimmicky design choices and too trendy styles. This one's a little tricky because we love some cool, trendy shit in logos, right? One of the ones which I was trying to illustrate, but I actually feel like I didn't illustrate it well enough, is when people just smash letters together for no real reason. And so like I'm like, that actually looks kind of good. I'm all right with that. But you know what I'm talking about, where like you see a logo and there's just a ligature that should not be there. It's like, why is it there? And then all of a sudden it becomes the most important thing in the logo, and you're like, is this MP company? Is that why we're doing that? There's also the like, I'm trying too hard and connecting everything together situation, which can be really fun for like headlines and things, but for a logo, it's just like people are gonna get tired of that like ASAP. It also just feels really student-y to me. This is a really good crowd for this trend because I'm sure everyone in this room remembers this, which is chopping little slices off of everything. That was like really big, just everything needed to have little slices chopped off for if this was for a knife company, great, love it. concept into it, I could sell that through with no problem whatsoever. But this would be like for some like random cookie company or something, and I'm like, that doesn't work. And then another thing that I find to be really funny is, so this is like the early 2000s in all tech companies. And part of this is because people choose fonts based on the name of the font. So if someone is making a tech company, they Google tech font, and then Neotech comes up by Seb Lester, which is why so many tech companies have this font as their font, which is hilarious. It's actually great and shows the power of SEO, right? So I've learned a lot about SEO just from releasing children's books, because I'm pretty sure the only reason my first 2 books are successful is because people just Google like Brave book and my book shows up. And so this is very true with font naming and stuff too. You can tell what the font designer wanted the font used for based on what its name is. And so another thing that you have to kind of avoid is using free fonts or extremely popular fonts in your logo type. And part of that is just because it becomes completely impossible to own your logo type if you're using something that's really accessible to everyone else. And that's not to say that like this is me telling you, you must spend thousands of dollars on bespoke everything. It's just, you know, pay attention to the trends, pay attention to what all the regulars are doing, all the normies, and just walk away from the normies and don't do that. And so everything was lobster for a while. I don't know if you remember that trend. And then this is what I would call sort of like a current trend. This is actually a font that I love called Degular. And a lot of people are using sans serifs that have these really high contrast joins. And I love them. I think they're beautiful. But also they're everywhere right now. So if I were redoing a text logo, I would think about not doing this unless I was like so confident that this company was gonna last for like 15 years and would be like the thing to define that look. But it's a risk to take. But we do it because otherwise we end up with this, which is just like the most vanilla thing to do of just like typeset it in Helvetica. And a lot of brands got kind of heat on doing this recently, like all these fashion brands. It was like the sans serification of fashion. And some of them are more successful than others, and some of them have like real legit reasons of why they wanted to do it, or they kept their original fancy logo as like a secondary mark that they use on product and things like that. But people get really sad when you take all the personality away, and sometimes you don't have to take all the personality away. So back to how we make lasting design. Sweating the details really matters. Attention to detail does really create lasting design because you can make something feel timeless by just going the extra mile and making sure that it is so technically good that when people look at it years later, they won't go, oh, that's pretty good considering it was made in Figma in 2024 or whatever. You know, like you don't want the software that you use to define the work that you do. And so you always have to sort of make sure that the designs that you're doing the design of them supersedes just the availability of the tools and things like that. So to give you a peek into my process, and I don't want to like go way over, so I'll like zoom through some of these. But first, learning the client goals and understanding their intention. So when I redid Jenny's ice cream, there were lots of goals. It had this weird awkward white space thing underneath. There was like, you know, it just had a more casual hand to it. But one of the biggest goals was to make it not look like it says penis. Because then once you see it, you can't unsee it, right? And this is like in the trying too hard category. Some designer thought it was a really good idea to just throw that apostrophe on top of the I, like not really knowing what they were doing. And so when I refreshed it, I always had that goal in mind. Let's keep that goal in mind. With Phil's Coffee, it was about do what you can with this, but maintain that like weird conspiracy uncle vibe that we have that everyone seems to love. You know, if you are a Phil's person, I live in the Bay Area. I love Phil's. Phil's is great. It's such a vibe. It's got like the sort of 90s Java coffee house thing, and like holding on really hard to that, and like kind of punk rock in a way. It's great. And so when we did it, we wanted to sort of make it easier. Like one of their big goals was they have to do a lot of signage, and all of those little intricate moments in the logo are really hard to cut out of metal and things like that. So they just wanted to simplify the mark without losing the vibe. So that's, was the goal of that one. Discuss the game plan for the complete brand identity. I don't try to I don't think it's a good idea to just do the logo and assume everything else falls into place afterwards. A lot of teams try to hire me to do the logo, which will then motivate the rest of the team to do everything else. And I'm like, that is absolutely the way my logo gets thrown in the garbage. Because nobody wants to just inherit some random asset and have no stake in the game. They want to be able to be a part of that decision-making process for what's like almost the most important part of the brand. And so I always try to discuss the plan and collaborate whenever I can. And then after that, evaluating the existing design and deciding what's worth keeping. So I love this part of the process because sometimes people pay me specifically to just critique their logo just to get everybody bought in on the process. And it's wild when someone says, tell me what's wrong about my face, and they really mean it and they pay you real money to do that. And so, and the thing that's amazing is that by the time we get through this, where I just point out all these things, these like drafting issues, these moments where the strokes don't really work, where, there's just like these little moments where it defies what like a pen would do, or it looks like it's drawn with different tools. Once they see that, they can't unsee it. It's like once someone tells you that there's stuff in your teeth, you immediately go to the bathroom and get that stuff out of your teeth. And so it's a really fun way for me to be like, yes, sure, absolutely, I can build trust with you while you pay me to do that. It's great. This is one of the ones, like, I'll just call out this little moment. There's like so many things that I could tell you and go over, and I made like a logo evaluation handbook that I think I talk about in this a little bit. But there's like, a lot of people add roundness to letter forms in general when they want to soften them up, but there's moments where you add roundness, which is usually on the exterior of the letter versus the interior, because if you add it on the interior, it just looks like the ink bled. And if that's like a purposeful, conceptual thing that you're doing, aces, but most of the time it just makes it look like you don't know what you're doing. And the consistent stroke angles thing is really fun too, because you know what engineers love to do? Draw a bunch of lines and circles on top of logos and tell you all the things that are not quite lined up and blah, blah, blah. And that can be really great if like your goal is making an extremely modular logo mark, right? But when it comes to creating logo types that feel like there's a human behind the drafting, a lot of times there's a lot of these little optical corrections that you do to make sure that it actually looks right rather than it's mathematically correct. And one of the things that you do with that is that if you have these long strokes, and especially on an italic angle, the longer that they get away from the baseline, which is what the letters sit on, the more they have to lean back. Otherwise, they look like they're falling forward. So people will draw strokes on top of everything and being like, this doesn't totally line up. And I'm like, let me show you an A-B of what that looks like if I do make it line up. And it always just looks like the whole thing is about to fall in its face. And so you have to make a bunch of optical adjustments when it comes to drawing type to make sure that it actually looks right, even if it's not right in terms of the geometry. So if you do want to see my logo evaluation handbook, it's just a series of questions that I ask when I'm going through the logo process, and you can apply this to like basically any asset stuff that you're doing. I really like people, like I love when clients take the initiative to come to me with like, here's what our team discussed and what we think is going on. They kind of workshop it before they come to me, because then I can really help them narrow that down into a scope and we can get on the same page really quickly. So create the scope based on goals, collaborators, and budget, and then begin broad and narrow scope with each round. So I begin broad, and then every round it gets narrower and narrower. So depending on what clients want, I can go really broad. So this was for a startup called Carrot, which is now a startup called Dupe. So that team like completely, they shifted gears and now they're a completely different company, but it's the same people making it. And so Carrot just wanted to try so many things. So my first round was really, really broad, whereas somebody like Southern Living, they were really happy with the existing logo. They just wanted to kind of take it into a new era and tidy it up and make it feel a little bit less masculine-handed and a bit more contemporary. And then discuss alternate versions and next steps. I did a logo refresh with a company called Chatbooks, and one of the things that we talked about is that they needed to use their logo really small, like on the sides of books and stuff too, on the spine. And so they actually have two versions of their logo, one that's made for like big hero stuff, and then one that's made for really tiny use, usually 1 inch or smaller. And when you're working on logos that need to work very small, the main thing is erase some of the details. Like you're gonna need to make your contrast between the thicks and thins less drastic, and then also add a lot more white space because it really closes in. So you can see the one on the bottom is the small scale logo, and they're meant to look like the same logo, but just used at different sizes. And they look quite different when you see them big. And then be a resource for the brand team moving forward. And then so why does attention to detail matter? We talked a bunch about that, but why does it matter to me personally? For one reason, I am someone that can look at 2 versions of Helvetica and be like, absolutely not, and be like, oh, that's pretty good, And so if you are that kind of person that cares to that level and can't unsee things, it's important to pay attention to the details. I also want to not be embarrassed about my work in 5 years. One of the things that's really lovely about going on in your career is that while your hockey stick of growth starts to flatten out, your embarrassment about your work doesn't, the cycle of that is not quite so quick. So when you're younger, because you're just growing so exponentially, you'll look at something you did 6 months ago and be like, who was I? What was that? And then once you're 40 years old and you look at something 5 years ago, you're just like, wait, that was 5 years ago? No, that was 4 months ago. And so I just want to make sure that the work that I do carries just for me specifically and that I can look back at it and be proud. And also, selfishly, I want my work to last. I don't want other designers to come in and be like, how do we make this better, or how do we do something totally different? And so just really bringing my all to the project is one of the ways that I can help to guarantee that, though, of course, there's no guarantee. I'm also one of those people who maybe late in life discovered that all of their tips and tricks for managing life are actually just ADHD tools and regulation stuff. So I love getting into hyper-focus, and it's really important to me that I can have a significant amount of my day devoted to just being in a creative flow mode where everything melts away. It's very important for my mental health, and so one of the reasons why I pay such attention to details and love this detailed work is because I just love zoning out and doing it for 8 hours straight. It is so meditative and amazing. And I think it's important to acknowledge that that kind of work is important for a lot of people. And that, and I'll mention this in a second, but just while it's wonderful that we can systematize and automate things, we also shouldn't lose sight of the fact that a lot of human beings are the people that do these designs, and different human beings have different needs in terms of how they produce and create. So to give an example of that, this is one of the pages of my kids' book, Who Will You Be? And I was talking at a conference, and there was a illustrator that talked right before me and showed this super detailed picture where they drew every blade of grass and described it as torture, and can you believe I did that, and la la la. Whereas me drawing thousands of tiny little books for 3 days was the best week of my life. I think I listened to every episode of Scamfluencers, which is a podcast that I like, and just blazed through it. The other night, literally last week, I watched all of Chimp Crazy between 9 p.m. and 1 a.m. working on a project, and I just love that. It's it's so zen for me, and I would do that any day of the week. So tools should augment your process and not automate your favorite parts, and it's something just to remember as people who build tools. I know there's a fair amount of people in this room that are connected to folks who build tools for us. And just always keep in mind that your experience might not be the same as someone else's experience, that we should keep this sort of collective empathy in mind when thinking about it. So do the part that you love to do and do it exceptionally. Thank you.
Jessica, thank you so much, Jessica. Wow, wonderful, fantastic. I mean, yeah, so many little and big truths right there. So wonderful. Also, oh, I have to leave this one on here. I always keep running with laptops somehow. The mystery is coming, right? There are so many questions that came up.
Oh,
the
yay.
first, from Michelle, I think maybe, is your store in Oakland?
It is in Oakland. I have 2 stores in Oakland. So JH&F is below my studio, which is on 15th Street between Harrison and Webster in downtown Oakland. And then I have another shop called Drawing, which is a children's art supply store, technically an all ages art supply store, because children and people from Philly say drawing that way. I went to college in Philly, so that's why it's called Drawing.
Oh.
But yeah, so they run both stores like one store with 2 locations, so they have the same back end.
Ah, wonderful, wonderful. There is one question that was actually upvoted a lot, and that was from a fellow designer asking, as a designer, I appreciate all the after versions in these slides, but clients might find the changes subtle. How do you structure the presentation to clearly communicate the new concept to them?
Usually what I'll do, I have very clear design directions when I'm presenting logos. So I'm like, and a lot of stuff comes out of sort of like strategy workshops and things like that. You know, when you get clients to tell you like, what are your values? And they're like, trust, people, blah, 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 you know? And then you can just use those to create these like design verticals. I think of them like toggles, right? So it's just like, this is the design vision in which we've toggled up trust. And here's the one where we've toggled up innovation or whatever. And so then I sort of present it as like, what's the most important thing to you? And that helps us pick a lane. And then within that lane, I show variations. But a lot of times I'm like a very open to just like letting them vote for the thing they like the best. You know, like I don't show things that I don't like, but I also know that like people need choice. Like everyone feels empowered by choice. And so a lot of designers are like one-option designers, and they just push them in the lane that they think is the right move. Whereas I am not opposed to like Frankensteining stuff as long as it conceptually makes sense. And if it doesn't make sense, I'll talk them out of it. I'll say, you know, like I understand why you said that, but if we do these 2 things, it really waters down the concept of both things and just turns it into like a stylistic choice rather than a conceptual choice. And so it's really just being able to like hold their hands through it. And also in all of my decks, I am not a person who just reads the PDF on the Zoom because that's so depressing and I hate it when people do that. I definitely like riff and elaborate, but I do write out all of my thoughts on every slide because I know that the PDF's gonna get passed around to a bunch of people that weren't in the meeting. And I've just realized time and time again, I can't trust the people in the meeting to communicate my words to other people. I have to give them the tools to be able to do that. And so I try to do that both like verbally, but then also just giving them a script to like tell the people.
Right. But then every now and again you probably get this sort of note like, oh, I like this in general, but that serif right here, can you make it better? like those kind of situations, like how do you, I mean, we shouldn't be making fun of the clients in that case, in this way. But well, I think every now and again you get the situation where it feels like this is almost an impossible task. It's either like go in this direction or the other direction. There is kind of this concept that we're trying to follow here. How do you articulate your decisions?
One way you can do that is to tell them about people who will be mad at that decision if you do that. Like you're like, oh, and I bet your logo and brand is going to get featured on Brand New, and people will love to talk about that weird serif you suggested. You know, like, so I think just the idea, like I always kind of bring them back to reality and be like, I'm not opposed, like you're giving me feedback because you're unhappy with something. Yeah. And I want to help you be happy with it. But it's like when you go to the doctor, you go into like the hospital because there's something wrong with you. You don't go in asking specifically for what's going to fix you. You go in with the problem and the doctor walks you through all the options and then you find the thing that's right for your specific illness, right? So I'm never like blanket no, but I try and like figure out why they're saying that and be like, why don't you like the serif? And eventually something comes up where they're like, I feel like I notice it too much, or I feel like it takes the attention away from this, or I feel like whatever, you know, or I feel like it could be a more special thing. And then all of a sudden I'm like, okay, and now we can have a conversation about like, I purposefully didn't make that serif more special because I don't want to draw everyone's eye to that moment. I want to draw their eye over here, you know. And then once they start understanding the why, almost every decision that I do, I can walk to a very specific, you know, utilitarian reason for it. Like I don't just like feel through it and be like, that feels right. Like there's always like a real thought process that goes behind everything. And I think even if you don't do that, if you don't approach things that way, you have to be able to reverse justify your work, which is a really fun exercise. So I'm a believer that like intuition is just an ability to tap into like deep knowledge without having to do that like mind map to get there. But it's fun sometimes to sort of like think about something you did intuitively and ask yourself why you did it and walk that decision back. And the more you do that and practice that, the more on your feet you are in those meetings. Because every now and then you'll get asked like a super ridiculous question and have to not call that person an idiot and instead like be like, oh, like one time I was doing a piece that was like a holiday project. And I got through this whole presentation and did all the stuff, and they were like, I have one question. Why red? You know? And it was for like a Christmas campaign, and like I couldn't just be like, because duh, you know, like, so I had to like bullshit on my feet about it, which was really just to me tapping into that decision power that happened along the way of being like, well, you know, the typography is really modern, and so I thought we needed to root something in tradition by sticking to a more traditional color palette.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden they're like, makes sense, moving on, you know, like, but I was like, that came out of nowhere, you know, like, and so that's why it's kind of fun to like do it as an exercise with all the things that you do. Like, I don't think that you should overthink everything that you do and have to justify it in the moment every single time, but it's kind of fun every now and then to just pick something out and be like, why did I do that? And to come up with the pathways that brought you there, because understanding how those pathways work make you better at defending your work.
Makes sense. I think it's also interesting that if you look back, maybe like, I mean, maybe it's just my personal feeling, but I feel like 10, 15 years ago, we had this really sophisticated, complex logos and brands with like all those little, like, not only stereos, but like everything was really so, a little bit weird maybe and funky in a way. And then with responsive design, we had to kind of got to the point where, well, for mobile, we have to simplify and maybe kind of move slightly more to sans serif. And this is a question that Mark Nelson is asking as well. I feel that the logo refreshes of today, especially for internet companies, often trend towards simplifying, sans serifing. Is it an official verb?
Yeah,
Maybe.
I would say. Yeah.
Sans serifing, sometimes at the expense of the brand's identity and flair. Overall, it feels like the logos of today feel more similar than the logos of 2 decades ago. How do you feel about that? And by the way, amazing closing talk. Holy crap.
Oh, thank you. I feel like that's true. At the same time, when you think about building something that's going to be really flexible with a lot of different systems in a lot of different ways, with also just like, if you think about seasonal campaigns or how things might evolve over time, or if a company completely pivots and goes in another direction, like having something that is more flexible is sometimes easier in that way. It also, like, you don't want all of the attention to be on like one asset, right? Like there's designers who are like, oh, a brand is a color and a font, right? And that's all that it is. That's all it needs to be. And I think that like design systems, you can call attention to different things in different ways. Like for some people, illustration is such a massive part of their brand that if the logo itself was too illustrative, then it would take away from all those illustrative elements. And so the logo has to be more quiet to match with the more elaborate illustration. For other people, the design is really quiet, and having a logo that really stands out is something that makes it all feel like it's cohesive. You just don't want to be like walking out of the house in an outfit with like 1,000 patterns and be like 10 hats and whatever.
I mean...
Or you can, because that's like pattern clashing or whatever. What power clashing? Love it. But it's actually really hard to do that. It's hard to pull that off. Like, I love it when people go super chaotic with brands and just like let it be all over the place. But I had to answer I am advising for a company right now and had to do like a trend report evaluation for them. And one of the trends that they had called out was this sort of like under-designed trend where everything looks like it's like a little bit bad. And I was like, do you know how incredibly difficult it is to do that? Like, it's so much easier to make good, simple design or even good, elaborate design than it is to make good, bad design. Mm-hmm. Like, that is, like, God tier, you know? Like, it's a hard thing to do. So I think, yeah, you just pick the thing you want to emphasize. And, like, I don't want, like, clients to erase the soul of their brand by any stretch. But at the same time, I understand that sometimes there's practical reasons for simplifying.
And, like, having worked with so many different clients from different organizations and also like just really, really strong brands out there. Do you have like still a dream project where you wish you could work or could be working on one day? Like if you could only do that, that would be fantastic. Do you have something?
I don't know if I have like a specific thing, but I always really love being able to work on things that I actually use in my daily life. Like, you know, if there's some product that is like a big part of my life or whatever.
Like a washing machine.
Like a washing machine. No, like even, you know, like food brands and like, you know, just, or things that my kids love. Like that's also huge. Like we all do this too with our parents, where you'll work on something that your parents finally understand what it is that you do for a living. And you're like, I did that. And then they tell all their friends, they have no idea what you did with it, but they're like, so-and-so worked for that thing that I understand. And I think that for me, it's like, it's always what's the thing that connects with the people in my life and gets them to like celebrate that moment, and that's really fun for me.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Jessica, for staying with us and being with us
Thank
here.
you guys.
Wonderful. Thank you.